All right, so I'm just going to record. So if everyone can just take a second and sign in, that would be great. The link is in the chat, or you can scan the QR code. It'll be on the next couple of slides. So if you missed this one, don't be too stressed about it. And we're going to get started. So again, this is our agenda for the day. So we're going to be defining what a CV is, talking about the uses, and then looking at CV format and content. And then we'll be reviewing some tips for CV development in general and just how you can get the best CV that you can. So does anyone, I guess it's right here. I'm going to go back first. Does anyone, I can't go back. Does anyone know what a CV is before I show you again? I see a couple of like thumbs ups. Does anyone want to unmute and tell us what a CV is or put it in the chat?
So we had someone post in the chat that it's a list of academic and professional achievements.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, a curriculum vitae is a cumulative record of your professional achievements, academic preparation, and qualifications in your discipline. So this will be kind of an important academic job search tool for you, but it can also be helpful in a couple of different kinds of roles that you might be applying for after undergrad. So for example, if you're looking for a research position, this could be super helpful. Tracking academic or professional activities over time. And then also if anyone is looking to apply for graduate school, this might also be super helpful. And I know that a lot of you may be wondering, like, why should I start writing a CV now when I'm still an undergrad? But it's really important to note that this is a document that you're going to carry with you throughout your career. And so starting to add to it now is going to be really helpful just to kind of keep track of what's going on rather than having to think backwards later, which might be a lot more difficult. So there are a couple of differences between a CV and a resume that I just want to note before we continue. So first of all, CVs are definitely way more comprehensive than a resume will be. So it'll include all of your relevant experiences and not just select experiences the way that a resume does, because you're trying to keep that resume to a shorter amount. So like a page. CVs don't really have that page limit. So they will emphasize your scholarly achievement, including your education, research interests, any publications you're on, teaching appointments you may have had, and then just related professional experience in general. Again, CV length will just depend on your experience, and it'll include a complete list of publications, posters, presentations, things like that. But also don't push yourself to get pages on pages on pages. You just kind of want to write as much as you need to write to really articulate your experience. And then I also want to note that CVs will always begin with your education section, and it'll follow a similar structure regardless of what you're applying for. We're going to talk about like the different categories that are included in a CV a little bit later. So again, a couple of uses for CVs. We mentioned a couple earlier, like applying to research positions or grad school, but you also can use this just to generally document your activities and accomplishments. If you have a full CV and then someone asks you for a resume, it'll be a lot easier to kind of pull from your CV to create that resume. And it can kind of act like a master document for everything that you've done as well. Some internships may also require a CV, so it can be really helpful to have that as well. Sometimes grant, scholarship, fellowship applications will ask for CVs, also research positions in your industry or generally in the government as well, consulting opportunities, faculty and other university jobs, and then merit or tenure review. So I do also want to note that there are a lot of universities that have their own CV format that they require faculty to use. So if you're looking at a career in academia, applying for grants or participating in research in their organizations, they'll likely expect you to have a CV, and they may actually present you with specific parameters for how to structure it. So for example, UMD has a faculty CV template, but we don't recommend that students use that yet since it's really long and it'll have a lot of categories that you may not have yet, especially as an undergraduate. So it's definitely easier to kind of create your own CV. And then if someone asks you for a specific template, to kind of apply that later on. So onto our content. These are the sections that we're going to want to include in our CV. So first of all, your identifying and contact information, like your name, your phone number, your email, things like that. Then you'll move into your education and certifications, then your research experience, which usually follows education like right afterwards. Then teaching experience, awards, honors, fellowships, scholarships, presentations and publications, any memberships or professional affiliations. So this will look a little bit more like any national organizations that you're a part of, then any languages that you know or skills that you have, your higher education service, which we're going to go into all of these categories a little bit deeper in a bit, but higher education service refers to anything that you are involved with on campus. So any student clubs or organizations that you're in, and then other skills or experiences like your clinical or technical experiences. Does anyone have any questions so far before we continue on? All right. And feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat or just kind of unmute yourself and interrupt me if you have any questions, but I'll keep checking in as well. All right, so this is our sample CV. It is 3 pages, so I couldn't get it all in one slide. And we do have this in document form, and I think Becca's gonna send that out right now to all of you so that you have this throughout the presentation and you can reference it as well on your own afterwards if you're kind of creating your CV. We know that it's kind of a lot to look at all at once. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that this is what it looks like. This is what we're going to be referencing throughout the presentation. And also that this student is specifically interested in studying brain development in youth. So they're going to have those experiences that relate specifically to that. And when you write your CV, you should do the same, where you are sharing experiences that are relevant to what you're interested in going into, whether that's research, grad school, whatever that looks like for you. All right, so now to break down our sections. The first one's going to be contact information. So again, this will be your name, address, phone number, email address. If you have an updated LinkedIn, you can include that. And then a website if you have one. I do want to note for address, you don't need to include your full mailing address. You can just include your town or city and then your state. So for example, College Park, Maryland, you don't need to put, like the road and your house number. You can just put College Park, Maryland. You also want to make sure that your voicemail and your email address are professional in nature. So I know you all have your middle school email address. That's kind of embarrassing. That's not the one that you're going to want to share with your employers. You want to share something more professional, maybe some version of your first, middle, and last name combined. No crazy like 10-digit numbers in there. We want to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward. You're also not going to want to include any picture or personal information like your social security number. I hope I don't have to tell you all not to just write that on forms and send that out to people. You don't need to include your age, your marital status, any children you have, or any other information that's just not job related or doesn't add to your qualifications. This is very similar to a resume. Your contact information is going to look very similar to what might be on your resume already. The only exception to this is some employers, like the government agencies, will require certain personal information, but there's really no need to include anything that you don't see asked for specifically in the job description. All right, so our next section is going to be education, and you can see that I screenshotted like these sections off of the sample CV and tried to put them in here, but feel free to be referencing that document that Becca sent. So you're going to need to include your degree and your major. I do want to note that this needs to be written out. So it needs to say Bachelor of Science in whatever your major is. In this example, I used chemistry, or Bachelor of Science, comma, chemistry. Don't put bachelor's in chemistry or majoring in chemistry without the mention of your actual degree. It's really important to write out Bachelor of Science. You're going to want to include that you go to University of Maryland. That's kind of obvious, but definitely include that. Make sure that it's maybe the top there. It's obvious. Include the location, although it may be a little redundant. Include College Park, Maryland, and then your expected graduation date, which should be written as like expected May 2025, whatever it might be for you. Don't put a date range for that. And then if you would like to include your GPA and it's above a 3.0, we definitely encourage you to do that. You don't have to, but you definitely can. This is also space that you might be able to include certifications or any additional academic training or professional training that you have. So for example, this student has a CNA from a local community college, so something like that might be helpful. Anything like that can be included here as well. Any questions on these first two sections? All right, I will keep going then. So our next section is going to be professional experience. So this section is usually divided into a bunch of different categories. There's a lot to choose from, but the sample ones that we chose here and that are most common are research experience and your teaching experience. So this will just be mostly dictated by the discipline that you're in. So whatever you are interested in will kind of dictate what you're going to include here. So you need to separate your academic teaching and your research experience from other related contributions. So like if you taught elementary or secondary school for a while or did community teaching, that'll be separate from your like academic teaching. So this is the research experience section on our sample resume. So just some things to note here that should be true of all of your sections that list experiences. They need to be in reverse chronological order. So the first experience should be your most recent experience. And then that, when it comes to research, that should include the name of the faculty member or mentor or supervisor in that role. So here you can see that each of these experiences has a mentor listed. The description should also be highlighting your purpose of research as well. So if you just tell me that you were doing this really technical thing in a lab, I, as someone who doesn't know anything about bio or chem, am not going to know what that really means. So imagine yourself handing your CV or your resume to HR for the first time. They're not going to know all of the technical things that you might know about your field. So you want to make sure that your bullet points are detailed enough to relay the purpose of your lab experience and not just the technical skills that you gained. While those are also important, you want to make sure that it's clear why you were doing what you were doing. You can see here on the bottom here, it denotes like how large the team was, the tasks, the purpose. So just making sure you're keeping that in mind. So then you can also list kind of how you did that and then what you accomplished in that role. This is the teaching experience section. So kind of same thing here, reverse chronological order, making sure that you're being really specific about the bullet points and what you were doing and why you were doing it. Something else to note here, there are 2 classes added here. So if you're going to include a class, it's totally fine to use the class code, but you also have to make sure that you're including the title of the class as well, because I, as someone who doesn't go to the University of Maryland or, you know, as an HR person in a company, I'm not going to know what BSci 170 is. That's not going to mean anything to me. So including principles of molecular and cellular biology in lab, that's super important to include. I think the class code makes it clear that it was a class, but you also need to be clear about what class that was. Any question on the teaching experience or the research experience? All right, I will keep going then. So our next section is going to be our awards, honors, fellowships, and scholarships. So this will be recognition of scholarships by the colleges and universities that you've attended or within your field. So you can see down here, this person has Dean's List listed, and then a scholarship they got and an award that they got from University of Maryland. So other examples of this could be if you're in the honors college at UMD or you participated in FIRE. These are both great things to include here. But if you don't have any, that's totally fine. You don't need an honor section. Again, like you should be picking and choosing what you need based on your experience. And as you grow as a professional, your CV will also grow and add more categories. Then we have higher education service experience, which I think we talked about a little bit earlier. So this is going to be any departmental and university groups or committees and task forces that you've been on or served on. So in this section, you're going to want to include bullet points for what you've accomplished and did in these organizations and roles. This is also where you can include any student group. So maybe you're in Greek life and you were the treasurer for your sorority or fraternity. You can totally add this here. Or you can add to the professional affiliation section if it's related to a national organization. Talked about this a little bit earlier. So an example would be the American Medical Student Association, because this is something that you can find across the country. It's not specific to University of Maryland. So this is the example of that on our sample resume that we're going off of today. So you can see the UMD Help Center is on here. The Health Center is on here as well. This person was a peer mentor in CMNS, and a student representative for CMNS as well. So again, this is reverse chronological, and it should include bullet points that describe what you were doing and also why and how you did it. So other categories that we might be able to add to our CVs. So memberships or professional affiliations. This is any professional groups or offices that you've held, but for this one, you don't need to include bullet points. So the example we used back here was the American Medical Student Association. If you were in that, you can totally list that you were in that. Maybe you held an office, but you don't need to include any bullet points in this section. Then languages. So some of you may be bilingual, trilingual, whatever that is. So just list any language that you know, but make sure to denote if you can read, speak, or write those languages, which combination of things. A lot of times we have students who may speak another language at home, but they were never really taught how to read or write that language. So just make sure you're denoting how fluent you are in each of them. And then publications and presentations. So any publications or presentations that you've been a part of or have been scheduled. So make sure you're listing those citations in APA format. I also want to note here that if you don't have publication experience yet, that is totally fine. You're just an undergrad, you're just starting out your career. Again, this is a document that's going to grow with you. And it's also okay if you're on a publication, but you aren't the primary author. That's still a great thing that you can list. So don't be too stressed about that, and make sure that you're really playing up your accomplishments here. You don't want to downplay the things that you've done as well. So again, here's kind of the sample of that. You can see they're in APA format. And you can also see that, a bunch of different authors were listed here. So that's totally fine. Again, you don't have to be the primary author. Some presentations as well. I just want to note that you can list these if they are scheduled, but you need to make sure that you're noting that it is scheduled. So instead of writing like, I presented this poster in September 2022, you would write expected December 2022, just the same way that you would write you're expecting to graduate in May 2025 or whatever that might be for you. It's the same thing just because it hasn't happened yet, but you are working on it and it is scheduled to happen. So it's okay to put it on. You just have to make sure that you note that it's expected and not completed. So just a couple of things to remember. One, don't reinvent the wheel. There's a structure for a reason. This document's going to be long. And so a lot of times employers or people that you're sending it to aren't going to want to spend a lot of time looking through the document to find the sections they're looking for. So try and stick to the order that we shared today and that is shared on the sample CV. If you have things all out of order, people are going to be confused and they're probably going to give up on reading your CV. So you want to make sure that you're kind of sticking to the same format. Second, length is going to vary with accomplishment. So I said this a couple times, but again, you guys are in undergrad. No one's expecting you to have a 10-page CV right now. That's totally fine. Again, this document's going to grow with you as a professional, and as you gain experience, you'll be able to add more, which brings me to my third point, which is just updating it regularly. So add new categories and information as your career progresses. We kind of recommend at least once a semester to kind of just sit down and document your new activities or accomplishments. That way you're not trying to look back on the last 4 years and figure out what you did in retrospect. That's going to be a lot harder. So even if you're just jotting down like simple bullet points right now and you beef them up later, you want to be adding to this as you go. And lastly, make sure you're being honest. So everything in your CV should be 100% true and accurate. Don't state that something has happened if it hasn't yet, like we just talked about. But again, you can list something that might be scheduled. Yeah, and then so style and appearance, or I guess first I'll check for questions. Any questions on any of that? I know it's a lot of information. All right. I feel like I'm talking to myself, but that's okay. So style and appearance, make sure you're being consistent with grammar and formatting, and make sure you're proofreading as well. Um, Even if you're just having your friend read it over or your mom or whoever it is, getting us another set of eyes on it is going to be really helpful in proofreading and just making sure you didn't miss any grammar mistakes or spelling errors. Another place that might be able to help you out is the Writing Center. They're totally more than willing to look over this as well. Second of all, I mentioned this earlier, don't use abbreviation or course numbers without the name of the class that are specific only to your institution. So another example of this is if you did participate in FIRE, you're going to want to write out what that stands for, because someone that doesn't attend the University of Maryland would look at that and be like, I have no idea what that means. So make sure that you're looking at your CV through a lens of someone who knows nothing about UMD. Third, your CV should only be as long as necessary to reflect your achievements to date. Again, no need to have a 10-page CV, only needs to be as long as you need it to be. There's no need to like try and lengthen it for any reason. Make sure you're using white space, bolding, and indenting to make it easy to read. So avoid colors, flashy designs. This is the time to really use that white space and make it look clean, because you don't have to fit everything on one page. So really like take up as much space as you need. There's no need to cram everything in either. Another thing, put your name and page number at the top of page 2 and beyond. You can see an example of that on the CV that we shared with you. In the upper right corner, there's a little header with the last name and the page number. So just make sure you do that. An example I gave is like maybe an employer's printing out like 10 CVs that they need to look through for an application, and all their papers fly all over the office because the fan hit them the wrong way. And now all of a sudden they're all jumbled. But if you put your last name and your page number at the top, they'll be able to put your CV back together. And so just keep that in mind. That's like maybe an unlikely scenario, but you never know what employers are doing with CVs. So make sure to do that. Pick one font and stick to it. Make sure it's not smaller than 10 point. We don't want them squinting at your CV either. Again, there's no need to cram everything in because you kind of have an unlimited amount of pages here. So make sure you're really making it look clean and easy to read. Second to last, share your CV as a PDF. Sometimes if you open a Word document or a Google Doc, it's gonna mess up your formatting if you sent it to someone. So make sure you're saving as PDF and then sending it over. And then lastly, you can see this on our sample CV as well, but the dates are typically left aligned on a CV, where on a resume, dates are typically right aligned. So just make sure that you're making that distinction and making those changes accordingly as well. So just a couple of questions to ask yourself, and we can send this PowerPoint out to you as well after we're done, and the recording will be accessible too. But first of all, is it readable? Again, you want to really use that white space, make it look good. Is it well designed, organized, attractive, easy to read? Are the categories labeled clearly? Is everything like blending together? Is it easy to find traditional sections of interest? So like your teaching or research experience. Again, like employers sometimes will just look for a specific section and they want to be able to find that really quickly. Did you use any acronyms without explaining them? Did you get your advisor to review it and critique it? Is your information accurate? And then have you and other people proofread it several times just to make sure that there's no errors. Even in making this sample CV, there were a couple times we had to go back and change spelling errors and grammar and things like that. And there were 3 of us looking at it and we didn't catch it for a couple days. So just make sure that you're really looking back. Everyone makes mistakes, but you want to catch them as much as possible before you send this to someone who might want to employ you. All right, that's all I have information-wise. Are there any questions on any of that? If not, that's totally fine. If you think of a question, you can feel free to email us. This is our email, so cmnscareers@umd.edu. I think Becca could probably put that in the chat if you want to copy and paste it. And then again, we'll send out these slides, the recording, all of that. If you haven't signed in or you came in late, please try and make sure that you do that. It's really important on our end to just grab attendance. This is also our website, so if you have any questions, feel free to hop on there. we're going to be putting CV resources up there as well. And then you can also find us on social media here in the bottom corner. We have YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and we also just started a TikTok, which is really fun. So we only have one right now, but check it out. I see I'm losing people. That's okay. But if you think of any questions, feel free to email us anytime. But otherwise, have a great rest of your week. And I hope this was helpful.
Thank you. You were very thorough. Appreciate
Thank you. I'll stick around for a minute if anyone has questions.
Could we switch the order of the categories